So, so yeah, I mean, as far as so we've talked about sort of the negative stuff. Let's talk about some of the positive stuff.
The dwarves. They were awesome. They
What did
each
you?
they each had personalities. In the book, I mean, I know you said that the book is boring. If you read the dwarves in the book, they have no personality. They're just there. And I love
Well,
that they gave them personalities.
uh, to for me on my aspect on the dwarves, it was very hard to keep up with who was who, and that's part of the point is that they've all got flowing, glowing, blowing, jobbing kind of names, and so like,
And
so
braids everywhere in
yeah.
different ways.
Um, so I've seen some criticisms on that. They're like, well, it's hard to keep up with the dwarves. That's kind of the point, is that the dwarves are hard to keep up with
I
who's
admit it
who,
too. Even after reading the books, I still couldn't tell all of them apart.
yeah, and it's a very difficult task, but it's made to be difficult. You're not. I don't think you're supposed to actually be able to separate them out, aside from the looks. Um, and one of them I think is from one of the dwarves, the one with not much facial hair. Um, and I don't remember what his name is, but uh,
It may have been Feely or Keely.
I think he's from Being Human, the British Being Human.
I think Keely is from Being Human.
I was like, oh, so
Whoever
that's
his actor. I don't even know the actor's name.
I
I
don't know.
just
I
know the
don't know the
person.
actor's name either because I'm not. I am the worst person when it comes to actors. Like I if the story's good, I'm happy with the story being good. I don't really care about who's playing what. But I love my British television. So Being Human was one of the shows that I really loved up until the fourth season. So
Speaking of British actors, what did you think of Martin Freeman's performance?
I like him as Bilbo.
Because, Peter Jackson actually put production on hold for 2 months while he went back to film in the UK because he wanted him to be Bilbo so badly.
I thought he did a fantastic job. He's even got some of older Bilbo's mannerisms a little bit and the speech pattern down a little bit. Yet still being able to bring in a different feel and performance to it. Um, but I thought Martin Freeman was a great choice for it. Uh, so and that and I love me some Sherlock Holmes as well. So
I have to say I'm really glad that they kept Ian McKellen because he's a hoot, and I love a Gandalf that smokes, drinks, and gambles.
yeah, this Gandalf. Well, and that was another thing that I noticed was that a lot of the like Gandalf, some of the characters that you're revisiting, Gandalf being the primary example, is that he does appear younger and a little bit more spring in his step than what he did in the previous movies. And I gotta hand it to Ian McKellen that he did a great job making a younger version of himself from 10 years earlier appear younger now that he's older than what he was when he did the original part. So yeah, it was really cool to see that.
I like that they did Elrond that way too. His
Yes.
hair was pitch black, and he was actually fighting off in the fields on a horse in armor.
Yeah, and he wasn't, and that was another thing was that the characters aren't. You're kind of getting to see them when they're not on the job. They're on the job, but they're not on the job. Um, Again, this is before the events of Lord of the Rings, so the severity of what's going on through the land hasn't hit there. So everybody's a little bit more jovial, uh, even though the situation is still kind of serious and there's some seriousness going on. The characters, even though you didn't like Galadriel, she's even a little bit more of a smartass,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so it was kind of good to see the characters in almost a vacation state. Like seeing your boss not in work clothes, just kind of hanging out, having a drink, kind of thing. It almost felt like that a little bit to me.
I noticed that when they did Gollum, because Andy Serkis actually talked a little bit about it on the Colbert Report when he did his Hobbit week, and they had to make sure to animate Gollum to look younger And in the movie, he actually does look slightly younger than he was, and
Well,
definitely more spry than he was in Lord of the Rings. Which props to Andy Serkis for doing that in the motion capture suit.
one thing that I'd really liked is that they did get the reflection in the eyes in the dark, which has always been the I would I would dare to say the main visual that you notice in The Hobbit is the shadowy figure in the dark with light reflecting out of the eyes, kind of like a cat, um, kind of just kind of peering out. So the Gollum sequence, what do you think?
That is probably one of the greatest movie scenes, one of the greatest theatrical performances I've seen in a long time. Just between the two of them, it was intimate without being intimate, and it was fun and serious at the same time. It seemed to have a perfect balance to that scene that I don't think you could have gotten any other way except having those two actors together in those roles. And when I was listening to some of how they did the filming, apparently when they did that scene, it was one of the very first ones they filmed. And when they filmed it, they didn't film it in pieces. They filmed the entire scene all the way through every single time they had to repeat it, just so they could get the flow right. And I was like, wow, there's such emotion in that scene that's kind of held back a little bit. It's really astonishing, but it's awesome. And I really hope that they get some sort of recognition for that.
That was, if there's no other reason to go out and see The Hobbit, you have to see The Hobbit just for that scene. Like, the movie's worth the price of admission for that scene alone. Um, the whole game of riddles was, I think I smiled the entire time that whole scene was going on. You're just like, "This is what I wanted to see," and it was definitely worth seeing.
It's just how you would imagine it coming out of the book. It really is. And Gollum seems a lot more human too.
Yeah, that was another thing, is that he's
Well,
got,
Hobbit-like,
Hobbit
not
like,
human.
yeah, his river folk thing. Like, he definitely, he hasn't gone into full skeletal Gollum, even though he is skeletal. Um, I in a sense, he's almost a little bit more scary because he's in that survival phase where he's just eating bodies, and you're just like, oh, and he's singing while he's.
While he's doing disgusting things, yes.
Yeah.
But then again, he's saying while he was beating fish against a rock too, so.
Yeah, and so it's just, he's happy that he's getting food, despite that it's a body versus a fish.
Yeah,
But
and of course they start the transformation too when he first loses the ring, and you can kind of see how it starts and what he's going to become.
yeah, and so yeah, I thought the scene played out really well, and that, to me, that was worth paying, for tickets to go see it and wait in line and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I can't praise them highly enough, and I know that you're not going to see very much of Gollum in the other two movies just because Gollum's not there. But man, if they could just have another one of those scenes.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious if they're going to do a fan service Gollum thing in the other movies. I don't really see where they've got room for it, but um, yeah, just seeing Gollum again, seeing him younger and with 9 teeth, uh, was just. I kept on saying, like, "What is teeth?" And then I have mom. It's just like
I was a little surprised in the movie where he says, what are hobbitses? And it's like, but you were a hobbit. Would you not recognize your own folk? And I guess they're trying to get across that his memory is kind of leaving him.
Well, the way I've always kind of interpreted is that he was Hobbit-like, but not a Hobbit. And it
In the
seems
books,
that
he was actually a hobbit.
was he a Hobbit?
He was a hobbit of the Shire.
Oh, okay. I thought he was like a Hobbit from like or not a Hobbit, but like a very similar to Hobbit grouping that was more by a river,
No,
by
I
water.
forget. Trying to think of the family he was actually part of because there was one I don't want to say breed of hobbits, but there was one type of hobbit that actually enjoyed swimming and boating because most of them actually hate water.
Hmm.
And his was a particular family that enjoyed it and they went boating all the time. And that's why I want to say it's in Lord of the Rings. It's either in the first one, it's either in Fellowship or it's in the second that you see him in a boat,
Yeah.
and it shows him, killing his partner and, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it from 10 years ago, and he actually, finds the ring for the first time. That is canon, that is in the books, and he is actually a hobbit. So I thought it was a nice throwback, but I was like, wait a second. But then again, he's also had the ring for many, many years. It's possible his memory's been corrupted.
Well, there's that, and then the amount of time. Like we don't have any kind of grasp on the amount of time that he's had the ring, and we know that it's
Right.
damaged him and his thought process and the way he thinks about things. But for all we know, he could have had the ring for 500 years or something like that, and it's prolonged his life that long, and he's completely. I mean, we do know that he's completely forgotten about who he was and how he used to live and stuff like that. So, but yeah, if anything, if you haven't seen the movie and you're still debating and you like Gollum, then you've got to see it just for the Gollum piece alone. You could be satisfied with watching the movie and just see the Gollum piece and then walk out. You'd be happy with that.
Yeah.
Not that the movie's that bad, but it's one of those things where like, yeah, it's an awesome movie to see as far as that aspect of it.
The technology on it's really improved too. For the CGI they did and the motion capture they did on Gollum, they've
Yeah,
just about perfected the technology for motion capture.
yeah, the motion capture is good. I contribute this to being a very colorblind man. CG for me still doesn't hold very well. So the Rock Giants, for instance, was just a little bit too much for me. I just like, oh, guys.
On some things, like I agree, the rock giants were kind of a little much, and I don't remember seeing those in the book either. But on some things like the Goblin King, they've actually done CGI studies on people to where if you make something look too realistic, people actually literally get creeped out because it looks too realistic. So they've had to scale CGI back to where it's only 95% realistic. So it's just enough that it's feasible, but it's not too real.
Yeah, the Goblin King. I like the dialogue.
Didn't like his death.
Uh,
That'll do it? No. No, no.
yeah. Well, that was
I know it was meant to be funny, but come on.
the
Really?
scrotum chin was a little hard to say.
Yeah. I was wondering about that. It's like, so is Gandalf gonna like poke it?
Yeah. Is there? And then like more or less, you're sitting there going, "Is there liquid in it? Are there testicles in it? What is in that
Don't want
thing?"
to know the answer to that question.
Um, he's
It's
a
like,
ball.
well,
He's a ball chinian.
yes,
For
yes.
for those of you who get the Men in Black joke, um, I can't really believe that I referenced a Men in Black joke from Men in Black 2. Is it 2 or 1?
I
I
think
don't
it's
even know.
two. I don't remember it from one, so I think it's two.
Yeah.
Although it's also
Anyway.
been a few years. But anyway, the,
Yeah,
the
I
little
have.
messenger dude was awesome. The
Uh,
messenger goblin. They sent him down the sliding chair.
yeah. Um, I enjoyed it. It feels like the problem that I think I had was that even though these are big virtual locations, I think it feels like they spent a lot of time trying to recreate the mines of Moria as far as the level of scale that everything is at. And I understand that they're goblins. They're going to have a society built underground, and it's going to be substantial because you're basically looking at a city underground. But it was almost too big. It was almost like there was just too much there to kind of keep your eye on. I had trouble focusing on the action at hand versus everything that's there. So that might be part of the problem with the 3D for me, was that I spent more time looking at backgrounds and foregrounds than the action that was actually happening on screen.
Right. Which that I can agree with. There was definitely a lot going on in the foreground and background too.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say that I think what kept it from being a great movie for me, and this is kind of a little bit of a critique of Peter Jackson, just his vision for the story and mine don't agree. I think he tried too hard to strike a balance between the different types of viewers who will be seeing this, the average viewer who hasn't read the book, the geek who knows every line in the book, the critics who are going to be seeing it, children, adults. I want to say he tried too hard to balance between the two, because it comes across as neither a kid's movie nor an adult's movie, and it doesn't come across as completely, Hobbit-ish. It seems like it's something in between Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, so that it's not one or the other, and I feel like I was wanting it to be one or the other.
I could see that. It's almost the same, and not near as bad as the scale as say the Star Wars prequels.
Agreed.
And that was a part of the problem with a lot of the Star Wars stuff, was that it was like, oh, look how much shit we can throw at you at the same time, and now you're paying attention to, oh, well, they recreated a stormtrooper hitting his head on the doors, versus actually paying attention to the scene. And there's a little bit of that in this, but not at the same scale, not at the same level.
Oh, definitely not. Somehow I think, I can't really pass judgment now because we only have the one movie, and of course, one movie per year. It's still going to be 2 years before we finish the trilogy. But somehow I think he could have done better had he kept it to 2 very packed movies instead of 3 kind of elongated movies with a lot of extra content.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll take those words back after I've seen all 3. But I honestly think, this movie probably, could have been shorter.
Well, and the other thing that I wanted to talk about was that Guillermo, who was originally slated to be the director for this, I'm wondering if some of the director choices that had happened wasn't because they were originally made for Guillermo's directing style.
From what I have read, and like you, I've been keeping tabs on The Hobbit since they started production, before they started production. They still gave him screen credits in the end. If you stayed for the credits, his name is still in there. Basically, the decisions that he made for the most part, PJ kept intact. He left it the way it was and just kind of continued on and kept going.
And that's where I think...
maybe that's where the mishmash kind of comes in.
I think that's where probably we're seeing some of the issues for those of us who've really kind of paid close attention to the Lord of the Rings. And then you go and see The Hobbit, and you're like, well, this doesn't really... There's a sort of a weird feeling. And I think a lot of that has to come from the fact that you've got 2 different directorial visions that are going on. And I think if Peter Jackson... I think it's one of those things where he wanted to have his hand in it, but he didn't want to have his hand in it as much as he had to. And so as a result, you have these movies where you're seeing a little bit of a struggle for. It's too late in the game to change some of the direction, but it's better to get made than not get made. And so I think that's where we're seeing some of the issues, because this doesn't feel like a full Peter Jackson kind of thing to it. And I think
that's it.
And I think and I was one of those people when I heard Guillermo was slated to direct. I was really happy about that, because I was like, well, if Peter Jackson's not going to do it, then he's a great person to have in, because he's got a certain sense about him, and maybe in the way sort of like we were talking about, where there's just too much stuff going on in the background, that might have been handled differently if it was under his direction. But yeah, like you can sort of feel that. It's not one of those things where I can sit there and express in technical terms. I'm just like, it just doesn't feel like. But I always wondered if it wasn't that some of this direction was from Guillermo's directing style, and that Peter Jackson was preserving a lot of that. So I kind of feel like that.
I could definitely see that explaining a lot of the kind of disjointed feeling in the movie. I mean, Peter Jackson was always going to end up being a consultant on the film, even if he didn't direct. You know, he was always going to consult on it. Philippa Boyens and her team, who were originally consultants on Lord of the Rings, they were back for this one too under Guillermo. So it was a lot of the same people, but I don't know. I guess they must have had almost drastically different directorial visions for the movie.
Well, there's some things. Oh, we froze up.
Huh?
Oh, you're back. We froze up for a second. That's okay.
I mean, like you said, I mean, you can't really put your finger on it, but the movie genuinely feels like two different people directed it. Different, although I couldn't tell you like when one or the other did, but it definitely feels very odd.
Yeah, I think
not bad, just odd.
No, yeah, it feels different, because at least from and again, I could be completely wrong, but like the dwarves definitely feel like a Guillermo kind of design.
That could be.
Because if you notice, they're not very Gimli-like.
Except for his dad.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, if you look at the way sort of Gimli is, that's a Peter Jackson Gimli, whereas you look at these other dwarves, and there are different characteristics that kind of stick out for each dwarf. Mm-hmm. Not only personality-wise, but there are physical characteristics for each dwarf that you look at and you're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But that to me sticks out as a Guillermo director choice. And I think that like the trolls, for instance, would have turned out maybe a little bit different if it was under his direction.
Yeah, I know that the dwarves scenes were one of the first they filmed, because they could film a lot of those without Bilbo there, since he was kind of on his own for a lot of it. So they did a lot of those early. So it's possible that they did all of those under Del Toro.
Well, I don't think he actually started physically directing. I think that...
Well, under his vision.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they would have had to have talked about how they're going to do this long before.
Well, yeah, with a project this big, you've got to map out what you're going to do.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the scripts were pretty specific.
Yeah. And so that's what I'm thinking, is that you're going with the description under Guillermo's thought process, and then you're having Peter Jackson direct it, and because you have those two different styles, he's going to have to inject more because he's doing the physical shooting. Plus, you've got Andy Serkis doing second unit,
right.
and the stuff that he's doing. So essentially, you've got three different personalities. Even though second unit director usually just kind of shoots the stuff that the director says to do, you've
right.
still got that sort of influence that's coming in from the other units. So you've basically got three people directing one movie, and so you do have that sort of, you can get that disjointed feel to it, and so that's where I'm coming from with it. That's why I'm not giving it a massive hard time like I've seen other people just rip this movie to shreds, and I'm like, it's just not. I don't think it's a fair. I don't think they're giving it a fair shot.
Yeah, I mean, they had all sorts of problems. I mean, before, during, and even after filming. They're still having problems with the Tolkien Foundation.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't surprise me. It'll be interesting to see if these issues persist into the second and third movies, because they've already shot all the footage. They're just in editing right now.
Yeah, and
so everything's already been shot that's going to be shot.
Pretty much, except for like pickup shots or anything like that they may do to include in the other movies. I don't think that you've. I'm more interested to see what kind of editing job that they're going to do for the other two movies, because this one doesn't feel. It does have that we got to rush because we got to get to the end of the movie to this movie, and so it does feel a little bit on the. To me, it felt, even though there was a long movie, it felt like we got to kind of get to the end. We got to get done with this. So I'm kind of anxious to see what they do with the other movies to kind of correct that. I think we might see a little bit better editing in the other movies.
Yeah, plus they may or may not, since they're still actually in the process of editing the second film, The Destruction of Smaug, they may actually take some of the critics' critique under, advisement.
They might.
Because I'm sure that they're actually seeing some of what these people are saying. I mean, they may not necessarily agree with it or even, remember it later, but I'm pretty sure that they're at least reading them.
Yeah, that was another thing that I was kind of curious about, and it's just one of those things I'm just wondering, because I've seen some people just sort of tear this to shreds, and I really don't think it's fair that people are giving it as much crap as they have. Because you do have, he has the Lord of the Rings that everybody's going to compare this movie to, and it's not really fair to compare that movie because, one, you don't have one director's vision going through it. You've got a truckload of production problems that, the whole financial end of this is just a mess, and usually. And this is what I'll say about this kind of stuff, is like, you remember the Fantastic Four, not the movie that came out, but the movie that was never quite released. Have you heard about that?
No, I haven't heard about this. Enlighten me.
There is a Fantastic Four movie that got shot and actually finished, but never got released. This is before the Fantastic Four movies came out. And basically what the production company did, the movie house that had the rights to the Fantastic Four, to fulfill their contract before they had so many years to make a Fantastic Four movie.
Right, kind of like Spider-Man.
Yeah, and if they don't make that movie in the amount of time that they're given, the rights go back to Marvel or whoever.
Yeah, Spider-Man had the exact same problem.
Yeah, which explains a lot about Spider-Man as well. But the Fantastic Four is a great example about this, because you can find this bootleg version of the movie, and I've actually seen it. It's atrocious. Great to watch. Not fair to criticize because it was never actually released. But the movie is horrible. The effects are absolutely abysmal. The Thing is basically a Ninja Turtle costume, but with orange rock stuff. It's the same. If you look at the costume and you look at the mouth movements and you look at everything, it's a Ninja Turtle costume. It's the same size. It's the same shape. They just glued, orange rock-looking foam to it versus, having green Ninja Turtle foam all over it.
That's terrible.
It's awesome. No, The Thing was actually, and I was actually kind of impressed with The Thing. The worst effect that you will ever see, though, is, first of all, Invisible Woman and Human Torch. Their effects barely happen. They barely get it. There's like at the end, the Human Torch finally turns into the Human Torch, and it's really bad CG. It
I was
looks
gonna
like
say his would have to be CG. I can't imagine them actually having him put on a flame suit and light him.
it looks like a computer-made storyboard that they're using to just put the scene in,
Oh,
so they can cut the movie like they need to.
yeah.
That's what his CG looks like. Her stuff basically is, oh, she's off screen. They're taking strings and pulling, a
Oh,
chair out or lifting up that's basically what they're doing with her. But Mr. Fantastic, and I can recreate some of this right here. My arm's stretching right in front of it. There you go. Look at how far my arm is stretching into the camera. And they actually did his effects practically, which look awful. So they've actually got scenes where his arm's extending out, but there is scenes where he's just like stretching his arm out towards the camera to make his arm look like it's stretching
so
further.
they just use perspective shots.
They use perspective shots, and then there's a couple of shots where it's obvious that there's a rig, a practical rig that they made with
Right.
some with a bunch of extra cloth,
Yeah.
and then there's a guy pulling a string along. But that's a perfect example of how too much of the politics and money that goes into a movie, and we're really lucky that we got to see a Hobbit movie, because for years they were saying, no, the Hobbit's not going to happen.
And now, of course, they're pushing for the next one already.
Yeah.
In the series, they're pushing for the Silmarillion to be made into a movie.
Are they really?
Oh, fans have been calling for it ever since they finished Hobbit production. Because now they know that Peter Jackson could be pushed hard enough to do The Hobbit. Because he loves, to be fair, he loves his work enough that he couldn't just let the project die after Del Toro bailed, effectively.
Yeah. Well,
so he wasn't going to let it drop. So he knew, he had to finish it for the sake of the fans, and the franchise.
In all fairness, Del Toro didn't bail. His contract was up, and he had obligations. But
I don't mean bailed in a negative sense. I just mean that he left.
He left because and that was the other thing, that these movies should have been shot a long time ago.
Oh yeah.
Like, even though they were shot a long time ago, they should have been.
He waited.
Shot.
Del Toro waited.
Yeah.
I think it was 2 years.
Something like that. It was just like.
Because they all moved down there.
Yeah, they were ready to get this thing going, and this was, I don't know if I could say typical Hollywood or whatever, but this was more people going, well, my pockets aren't lined yet, and I want to make sure that I'm going to get a chunk of this, because I know you guys are going to be selling toys, video games, and merch, and I want my merch.
And they're going to make an assload of money.
Yeah, and even with, we're looking at $1 billion now, 2 weeks out. And, I haven't seen a whole lot of Hobbit merchandise.
It's mostly costumes and the swords. Of course, they had to manufacture copies of the swords, and there's a light-up Sting now. But other than that, there's not much merchandise out there. Not yet. Which
you'd figure with the dwarves, you're going to have plenty of merch for that, so...
Oh yeah. Oh, Halloween next year is going to be hilariously fun. But, like we were talking about, the fans want the next movie already, and somehow I have a feeling that Peter Jackson is getting kind of tired of doing this. I don't blame him for being tired of doing this, if in fact he is. But
I think he was tired after Lord of the Rings. That's why he wanted to be producer on it, and not necessarily take up the directing mantle. And and now that we've got, again, we're looking at a two-vision director type deal, and now he's getting flack for well, it's not directed like it was before, and some of the cinematography is not the same as it was before. I think he's going to look at that and just kind of go, you know what? You know how much crap I had to put up with to do this?
Yeah.
If you guys are going to be that cranky about it. But, it's not really, from what I've noticed, it's not really Hobbit fans or Lord of the Rings fans that are disappointed with it. I think if you're a fan, like I am, where I consider myself sort of a casual fan, I enjoy it. No, I don't live in the world, and I don't read the books, and I'm not completely absorbed into it, but I enjoy it. I like it. To me, it's that vacation where you can hey, I'm not in my crappy real world right now. I'm hanging out in the Shire.
I think you'll find that most Tolkien geeks and followers, I have not seen a single one say they didn't like the film overall. Every single one of them has basically said, it's an enjoyable film. Yeah, there are things that we may not, agree with as far as the vision went, and there are little nitpicky things about, plot holes and that sort of thing in the book, but every single one of them enjoyed it. So I think the only people who don't are people who don't know the world and don't know anything about the movie.
Or they're just straight out movie critics, and they're just like, and granted, if you're going to watch a movie and you're going to critique a movie, it's going to be about the movie itself versus all the additional content.
Right.
But even on a movie level, like as picky as I can be, I still didn't have that much of a problem with the movie. And so I'm not one of those people that studied the books drastically and was like, well, that person wasn't there, and this person doesn't belong there, and that they were never there, and that person is there for some reason, and I don't care as long as the narrative is tied together relatively well, and so I was pretty happy with the movie, and it lived up to my expectations, and overall, I'm okay with it. So do you have any final thoughts? Anything that you want to stick to that?
As a cosplayer, and as someone representing a cosplay podcast, I did want to say that I'm really happy with the Lord of the Rings costume designers for being so open about their costume designs. I mean, The Hobbit has barely been out for 2 weeks, and there are already people who are coming out with detailed photos, detailed sketches. At the end of the DVDs, the production team has actually been putting interviews and very close-up shots with the actors and the costume designers, putting it on them to make it really easy to reproduce them. And I can't think of a single other movie besides maybe Thor that has done this. And I want to say, thank you for making this so accessible to the fans, those of us who would actually like to make ourselves into hobbits and elves and dwarves. So I think that is awesome, and it will make Halloween much easier next year, because I have seen costumes that I really like, and I may be making some of those. But all in all, that aside, I would say definitely go see the film, even if, the critics are getting you down. Even if you hear that this isn't, a great movie, this isn't Lord of the Rings, go see it. You'll still enjoy it. Yeah, it's not Lord of the Rings. You'll still enjoy it.
Yeah,
I'd go see it again. So
that's where I'm coming from. If you're one of those people who, like, if you take critics by what they say, don't. Because it's not. First of all, this movie is worth seeing in a theater.
Yes, I agree.
And like I said, I've never been a big 3D proponent, but and I haven't seen it in the 48 frames. If high def is something that bothers you, if you're one of those people that have like a 1080p 120 hertz refresh rate and you're used to watching things like that, then it shouldn't be a problem. If you're somebody who doesn't, or if you just have a 1080p with like say a 60 hertz refresh rate, which is what my TV in my room is at 60, you still get that theatrical look without it, but you still get a great amount of detail. Then go out and see the 24 frames, and it's the only thing I could say is maybe do your research on what theater actually puts the projectors at the right level of brightness so you don't get black mush, and hopefully they have a good surround sound. But it's worth going to see this movie in theaters. I would really love to go see it in IMAX.
I saw it in an IMAX theater.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did.
We
didn't actually see it in the 3D, the IMAX showing, but we saw it in a theater that had it. So it's it's worth the extra money for the extra quality. The
Yeah.
sound, especially.
Yeah, I really want to hear it at a good theater. The problem is where I live at, like one theater I know has the blown. It seems like every theater that they have in that one movie theater in that
Yeah.
building in all their separate theaters, all of them the left front speaker is blown,
Yep.
and uh, and I'm that guy that's like, dude, your left speaker is blown. Well, how do you know? Because I can hear it, and I'm that guy. And it's unfortunate for you, but if you want me to go in and recone your speaker, I'll go in and recone your speaker for you. But
Yeah, so I guess we'll come back in a year and we'll see part two. Of course, by then the DVD for this one will be out, and we'll have a whole bunch
yeah,
of extras.
yeah, maybe we'll do a DVD. We'll do a DVD
Release
preview.
review.